the biggest news is the Supreme Court being a completely unelected body of oligarchs. If only there were oligarchs, but like psycho, like, Carrie's mom oligarchs who are just hell bent on taking away any civil rights for anybody.
How can they be this upset? They're going on such gorgeous trips. I mean, truly incredible. I'm like, at a minimum, we got to get that Clarence Thomas trip at Costco because this seems gorgeous. I would love to be able to
summer.
Get the passport stamped where the Kavanaughs have gone for free.
Absolutely. But no, it's not enough. No, because that's the scratching the back. So that's the you scratch my back.
Yeah.
And they have to scratch the billionaires' back. So this is, of course, we're in the middle of our hot verdict summer. It's almost over. I don't know what else could go wrong, but we have affirmative action, the right to discriminate, I just uttered those things, but basically LGBTQ plus rights. And then student loan debt relief being struck down. So those are the three big ones. And I want to, I don't know which one tickles your anger or ire the most, Megan. But let's just start with the one that annoys me and upsets me the most personally. And maybe it's because it feels a little personal, but this affirmative action ruling, which was interesting because learning about affirmative action and actually how it all came to be and what its origins are, you realize it never was even applied or enacted in earnest without being immediately challenged by so many people. And in this case, it was a group called Students for Fair Admissions that is headed by a right-wing activist named Ed Blum. Now, Ed Blum had multiple cases before the Supreme Court around affirmative action, but he always had white plaintiffs. And he said at a conference in front of a bunch of Asians, I believe it might have been outside of Vegas. They were all drunk, obviously. No, and he said to them, I need Asian plaintiffs. So that's what he did. He recruited Asian plaintiffs to go forward to challenge the affirmative action, or at least the consideration of race in college admissions in Harvard and University of Northern Carolina. And he won. They won. But we all lost. And interestingly, Asians, I think, also lost. So I want to just get into that because it's important. God, where to start with this? Let's just remember that actually Harvard started on its own accord. This is bizarre, but interesting. Not bizarre, but very interesting. That in 1968, after MLK Jr. was assassinated, the Harvard dean announced that he would commit, I'm assuming to enrolling a substantially higher number of Black students than in the past, sort of because of this traumatic and horrific thing. And he said, quote, the students who survived the hazards of poverty was intellectually thirsty and had room for growth. A student who had, survived the hazards of poverty, was intellectually thirsty and had room for growth would be given preference. Sort of again, hat tip to Black Americans, Black young people. For the Harvard class admitted in 1969, Black enrollment jumped. Of the 1,202 freshmen of the class, 90 were African-American, up from 51 in 1968. 76% increase. So it's kind of like they just found it in the goodness of their hearts, as if Harvard hasn't, upheld slavers and all those things in the past. But, there they have it. So they did it on their own accord. But in 65, Lyndon Johnson issued this executive order that prohibited employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, and national origin. So it's not real. They call it affirmative action, but it wasn't really about sort of deliberately trying to assist people of color, specifically Black Americans. So that was in 1965. But then I'm sorry, I have to switch. I don't have a graphic for this. In 1978, a man challenged the University of California, Davis's admissions in terms of considering race in college applications. He challenged them in 1978. This is just a few years after it was approved of, that it was okay to consider. And he won. He's a white guy. And he claimed that Black students were taking his place. And he won. So what I'm trying to say, Megan, this is a roundabout way of saying it, is that it was effectively dead in the water before it even was enacted. So affirmative action was an idea implemented piecemeal here and there, Then there was this decree from Johnson, and then it was immediately like challenged in a million different places, to the point where actually even currently, even before the Supreme Court overturned it, 9 states, Arizona, California, Florida, Idaho, Michigan, Nebraska, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, Washington, have previously banned affirmative action policies at public universities. So it was the places that it's still active in universities, it can only legally be a facet of all that you consider when you consider a student's application. Now, under the according to the Supreme Court, it can no longer be a facet. It is not a facet. But finally, who did it help? Who did it help? Ironically, since affirmative action, it has helped Asians far more than Blacks, than Hispanics, and a little bit of whites. But so white enrollment went down. This is a very non-mathematical but generalized trends graph from New York Times, which shows that actually Asians were some of the biggest benefactors of this. And Blacks and Hispanics remain underrepresented at top universities, even as a share of white students, and many of these schools has dropped, in some cases below 50%. The largest growth has been among Asian students. Blah, 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 blah. I am mad that I'm Chinese, that this white guy took a bunch of Asian parents who were unable to get their kids into Harvard and was like, you know who we should blame? Black people. And they were able to use this model minority BS status in order to like win over and win this case. And a majority white Supreme Court was like, yeah, oh yeah, this is perfect. We can wash our hands. We can use Asians the same way this guy's using Asians, and we're all golden. Meanwhile, Asians overwhelmingly support affirmative action and have benefited.
Yeah, it's really too bad, because I think amongst white people, especially the white people I grew up around, affirmative action was always a very dirty phrase.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it was like it was a victim of really bad branding.
Yes.
And you hope that the Supreme Court of all institutions, I guess, will be above what sort of common dumbasses think.
Yes.
And you see like, oh, you're just like us. You're as stupid as my parents' neighbor. And that's really shocking. It's also like on just like a pride level, if I didn't get into a college, I wouldn't take it to the Supreme Court. Like that's an L. I would
everyone knows.
Quiet.
Like if everyone knew I didn't get into UC Santa Barbara, which I'm telling you everybody right now, but I took that to the Supreme Court, be like, damn girl, you didn't get into UCSB.
That's so embarrassing. Like that's so crazy embarrassing. I am married to an Asian man. Very stupid.
He is stupid.
Very stupid. He went to 3 colleges. It took him 7 years to graduate with 1 degree. And you don't see him going to the Supreme Court going, oh, well, I'm mad that I'm Asian and not smart. It's just, sometimes that's how the chips fall. I also like, I think the thing that is sad too, I went to a very diverse, socioeconomically and racially diverse high school. And I loved it. It was so fun. And I think for you to be like, I don't want to go to school with Black people, 1, you're racist. 2, I don't think you've ever been around Black people, because you're just going to make it not fun. Because when I went to college, there were no Black people. It was a predominantly white and Asian college. And I was like, well, this sucks. And you're only hurting yourself as a racist white person by going, I'm not going to be around anyone else. I only want to be around people that look like me, think like me, have the same upbringing as me. And it's like, okay, well, you're going to you're going to go to the airport and have a really bad time because there's other people out in the world and we can learn from them.
Don't
and
ever ride public transportation or go on
like
a
that.
fucking
I think
subway.
that is some of what the dissenting justices were saying of like, this is not something that it was put in place to just benefit Black students. We think having a diverse population at higher education schools is beneficial to everyone.
Right.
And the reality is it is. I don't want to be around a bunch of Megans that I know my story. So I don't need 10 others. I would rather be around people that have a different story that I can learn from. And that, I mean, that's almost like greedy. It's like we should be pulling from each other. And so it's really sad too to know that that's a miss.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you first said is right on the money in terms of the myth around affirmative action became so much louder and greater than what it actually was doing. The idea that like, well, if you if you just have a little, if you're just mixed or you have a little bit of Asian or you're half Black, like you'll get in, the doors will open up to you, as if that was ever the case. And as if that was in practice what happened. But it did, we have seen a rise, in enrollment of Black young student, which is still is like actually not much better than in the 80s in the year 2023. But it was better than it was in like the 60s, so it's just so ridiculous. And it is, it's okay because, I mean, it's not okay, but I do feel like this is part of like, getting serious and honest about who affirmative action was supposed to help. And if that was Black Americans for past wrongs, then affirmative action was a terrible tool in which to do that. And it was not specific enough. And we need to go farther, either with actual reparations or with some kind of, whatever it might be. I mean, we could go big revolution, third Reconstruction, fucking take it all. Like, let's do it. Or it's whatever, imagine in education, in housing, in all kinds of ways, we can actually target the people that were meant to be targeted. Of course, not without a lot of white folks getting mad. And the last thing I'll say, Megan, is like, even when you just said like the diversity, it's good for all people. I totally agree with you. But isn't that such a weird way to frame it, that like, we're still sort of pandering to white people to be like, see, it's good for you to go to school with people. I mean, you don't want to live in the same neighborhood as them, but like be in a classroom. And it's like, which I agree with. Like, and it's also not just white kids, but like, I agree with it. But it's like, that's how we're trying to fucking shoehorn this issue, which is an issue of justice, into an issue just about education. And it's like, actually, I don't know.
Well, white people they're not going to, myself, I'm away, accept anything that is not going to benefit them. So you almost do have to phrase it as like, no, but this is going to be good for you too. And they're like, no, we still don't like it.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.